Okay, so that says pretty much at 5 past the hour. So let's sort of kick off. As I said just at the very beginning, it's just so good to welcome everybody back to sort of a webinar. I'm just straight off a call, a national sort of a call with colleagues from Department for Education and associated sort of partners from the opportunity area, where there was shared sort of a learning. And it was just such a privilege to be highlighting the work that has happened across sort of Bradford during sort of a pandemic. And people were incredibly complimentary about the way that everybody has come together in order to take care of the needs of children, young sort of people. And this call right now just represents that. So you know, I'm just looking along, 3 people bang in the middle of my screen. There's Roz from Public Health, there's Ruth from Local Authority, Educational Psychology, and then there's Nicola, head teacher at Lillycroft, sort of a primary sort of a school. Oh, and actually just next to Roz, I see Catherine from sort of DFE. I mean, what an amazing collection of individuals coming together to say, how do we put our organizational barriers to one side and how do we genuinely work together in order to support the children, young people, as we now enter the recovery sort of a phase of what we've been through. And Ruth always reminds me that we really need to give ourselves a pat on the back and sort of say how well everybody's done, our children, young people, but every part of the sort of system for surviving, you know, the biggest sort of challenges that this sort of country have seen since the sort of Second World War. And we should be very, very proud of what's been achieved. But now we've really got to start looking to the future and sort of saying, how can we start mitigating a lot of the damage that was occurred? But how can we also take the opportunity that's been afforded by the pandemic and the spotlight that's been shone on some of the really bad things that happen to children, young people? How can we take this sort of opportunity in order to change the system for once and for all? And I think we've got a really exciting year ahead of us and great opportunities to really create lasting sort of a change. And these meetings are going to be really important part of that, where we can start having the conversations that we need to have about how we work together as one in order to shift the needle on all of the problems that we want to see changed. So I think we're going to, so of course, it's going to be a bumpy road out. If that's the other thing to sort of point out in all of this. And that's witnessed by the fact that now poor Duncan has managed to get COVID and is off ill. So Duncan was due to give us an update on living well, but I know that one of his wonderful colleagues will do likewise instead. Now, I'm not sure, is it Roz that's going to give an update? Roz, give me a thumbs up there. So Roz, can I hand over to you, and can you perhaps give us a quick sort of a reminder of what Living Well Schools is all about, and then tell us where we're up to on that to date?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everybody. This is my first time to one of the webinars, so thank you for having me. So I'm going to give a really brief overview of where we're up to with Living Well, and then I'm really pleased that we have Lorna from Children's North East, who's going to talk to you about one of our flagship programs that we are running a pilot in Bradford. So and then I'll just bring that all together at the end with what the next steps are. So I'm sure you already all know about Living Well Schools and have heard about it quite a lot, but it's an umbrella that is bringing together all the services and resources across Bradford into one place in this website to make it much simpler, hopefully, for schools to access information, services and resources they need around physical health, social and emotional health, and also classroom inequalities. The website is almost ready to go live. I will share the link with you so you can all have a look, but do bear in mind that there are a few debugging things that need to happen. So if there's anything that's not quite that changes in the next couple of weeks since you first look at it today, you'll just have to bear with us. But we've got loads of exciting programs on there. I'm also going to have a really brief outline of our adversity, trauma and resilience work that we are doing just as a whole school approach as well, which is in development, because I'm hoping that some of you might be interested in working with us because we bring together partners. Lorna, are you here? Oh, there she is. Fantastic. So it's really exciting that Lorna's come to speak to us today. She's from Children's North East, and we are commissioning them to run this pilot of 21 schools in Bradford around poverty proofing the school day, which obviously falls under our classroom inequalities section of the Living Well Schools programme. So I'll just let Lorna talk to you about it, and then I'll wrap up afterwards. So go ahead, Lorna.
Great, thank you so much, Ros. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I am coming live and at you. Hello, a nice few friendly waves from Tyneside, and really happy to share with you about poverty proofing the school day. Now, it really just hearing that introduction about, you know, you're in the recovery phase. I think this is a really fantastic opportunity to engage with this pilot. Just to give you a quick background about it though, because the word poverty proofing is used a lot. Our charity is the longest running regional charity, children's charity in the Northeast. We've been going for 130 years, and it was started off by a couple of philanthropists who were living in one of the nicer parts of Newcastle, and they were really worried about vulnerable, poor children, most of whom were orphans living on the banks of the River Tyne. And what they did was they took them on a boat trip to Tynemouth for the day, gave them a pair of shoes because most of them didn't have shoes, a belly full of food, and just, you know, a head and heart full of memories. And from then we have continued to grow. And in 2011, poverty still existed, obviously not just in Newcastle, all over the country. And what we got then was some money to do a consultation throughout the 12 local authorities from in the south, from the Tees up to the Tweed in Northumberland, in the borders. And we put out thousands of disposable cameras, and we got thousands of photos back, and going through those photos and speaking to the children and young people who'd taken the photos, talking to them about their lives, and they had been identified as living in disadvantaged postcodes, talking about their hopes, their worries, their fears. Many things came out, but overwhelmingly they said that the worst place to be poor was school. Now, this was not expected at the time. So what we did was we worked with 2 primary schools and 2 secondary schools, and we worked with them over a year, and we just unpicked what is it about school that made it, number one, there were 2 questions we asked. Number one, do we know who's poor in schools? Do other pupils know who they are? And number 2, what is it like to be poor in school? Do you have the same access to opportunities that your peers have? And a huge amount of things came out, things like with free school meals, pupils being able to identify who's on free school meals or pupil premium. Maybe there's a blue dot still next to their name, there's a blue sticker on their book, whether it says FSM or £2.20 every day when I'm in a secondary school and I put my finger on the biometric system. Maybe there's different food choices to be have, and just lots of different experiences, and pupils feeling different about the school day to their peers, and other pupils being able to identify that as well. And we've continued to work with schools throughout the 10 years that we've been doing this. Things like, you know, additional opportunities, children telling us, well, it's great that there's a football club at the school because I can't afford to go to the, you know, join a football club outside, but I won't go because I'll be the only one that wears the PE kit. Everybody else is wearing the latest kit of whatever the local team is. You know, children, you know, just last week telling me I'd love to go away on the residential, but we just can't afford it. And, you know, how many children, I wonder, nationally don't take the letters home because they know that they're not going to ask their parents. They know the money's not there. And so, you know, during our 10 years of doing this, we've worked with hundreds of schools and delivery partners throughout the UK. What we do when we come into schools is we'll speak to every single child in a school, in a primary school, in the secondary school. We work with crews, we work with special schools. The reason that we speak to every single pupil is that we don't necessarily know who's struggling with money. I mean, I was in a secondary school up here in the Northeast last week that was telling me we know our families. And yet when you speak to the families, they're saying, I would never go and let the school know that I'm struggling because of that stigma that's attached. And so really what we do and our guiding principle is that there's no activity or planned or otherwise that will identify or exclude anyone based on their financial background. So it's about inclusion, our work, and making sure that all children have the opportunity to join in with things. There's a big difference between having choice and having the option to do something. So whether it be, you can choose to bring in a birthday cake for your birthday in primary school, but maybe some children don't actually have that option. There's no choice there for them because there's not enough money coming in the house for that to happen. And, I've worked in schools, for example, where they've said, children have told me, you don't want people to know when your birthday is because they're saying what you're bringing in, or am I getting, are you inviting me to your birthday party? And so it's very much what we do. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of examples that I could give you, is just really understanding that lived experience of pupils within a school, not to identify who's struggling or not, but to understand what the school day is like for the poorest in your community, to understand that experience of the structures of the school day, of the policies, of the procedures that are in place, and the perceptions or the misperceptions that there might be surrounding that, which are potentially meaning that pupils are just not able to join in. There was one school that I've worked with quite recently, a lot with, was talking about the power of a pencil sharpener. They sent out loads of packs to their families during COVID, but they didn't put pencil sharpeners in, and they realised that some of the children stopped working for a while. And when they went back to them, they realised there wasn't a pencil sharpener in that pack, and there weren't additional pencils in the households. So sometimes it's the smallest of things that do make a difference. But what we're doing is helping organisations just to look at the structures, and any kind of, in any organisation that we work with, there's always, this is what we want to happen, this is what we think is happening. And quite often it's like, this is what is the lived experience, what is actually happening. And sometimes they're all three aligned. In my world, many times they're not. And so we reflect that back to senior leaders within schools, and we will talk about what's working well within settings, because it's really important to note what's working well, and also what is areas, considerations to explore. Ros, I don't know if you want to jump in now. We open it up to questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lorna. And I'm really pleased that you came and talked about it, because whilst I have done a reasonable job of talking about it, you really bring it to life. So I really appreciate that. So what I will do, there's a couple of parts to this. So as I said, we've managed to secure funding to do a pilot, which is going to be 21 schools across Bradford. 6 of those schools are going to be allocated within the RIC schools area. And then I still need to identify the 15 schools that we're going to work with. Now, ideally, after Lorna's talked to you about it, you all want to be involved. So what I'm going to do is put my email address into the chat, and do get in touch with me if it's something that you want to be involved with. I am looking for a spread of schools across the city. We are going to be doing primaries and secondaries, and also not just looking at the most deprived areas of the city. We want to do it kind of across all areas, so we have a good mix, and then it'll be great to get some themes and an evaluation after that. So that's the first part of the poverty proofing. So please get in touch, and I might get in touch with some of the schools if we don't maybe have an even enough spread. And then the second person is the second thing is that I'm still looking for an additional lead person to work with poverty proofing schools. So we're upskilling staff in the area because we're doing a delivery partnership model, which means that the Children's North East come and do the training for us, and then they work in partnership to kind of scaffold and do supervision. And I won't go into all the details, but do get in touch if you are interested in kind of taking a lead on this, and we can discuss the details. Could nursery schools be involved? We're just looking at primary to secondary at the minute. I don't know what's going to happen afterwards in terms of funding and how it might happen, because we just have funding for this pilot, but then I'm presuming we're going to get some fantastic evaluation from it, and then that will hopefully lead on to something else. So the lead person will need to have time available to do it, because they're going to be involved in doing 21 schools, which might take about 5 days per school. This is going to be across the whole of the academic upcoming year, so it's not going to be all at once. You need to have leadership skills, because you are going to be running the kind of the staff that are going to be doing it with you, who are apprentices, the mental health and SEND apprentices, who are fantastic, and some have been COVID ambassadors, and then also report writing and giving feedback to the schools as well, so working with schools to kind of come up with the action plans. So please get in touch. Thank you, Lorna. I think that's probably...
Can I just say something else? Because I'm just looking at some things that I was writing down during. I think it's for schools that are thinking about it. It's about deep listening. It's about listening, and this is a really good chance for you to feed into your recovery phase now. This is a great time to be able to do it, and it is looking at systemic change and looking at it at a school level. And it is a fantastic. I've been ahead. I've been a teacher, and I tell you what, it's a huge privilege being able to do this. So if you are interested in being a lead, speak to Ros, but also you can put people in touch with me, Ros, if they've got any questions about that, because it is just a huge privilege to be able to go into other people's schools and speak to every single pupil.
Thank you, Lorna. I really appreciate that. I know that I'm quite, I don't have loads of time to talk about everything that I would normally waffle on about, so I'll be really succinct because I know there is a tight agenda. So the other things I just wanted to mention about Living Well schools is I do need some pictures of children to go on the website, because you will notice on our website currently they are just stock photos. I'm working with some people to try and get some local pictures. But if you are a school, ideally a secondary school, because we have quite a mix of, we've got quite a few primary, I think, pictures coming in. But if you would like your school to be involved in taking pictures, or we have a photographer, then do get in touch with me, because ideally I'd really like our Living Well schools in Bradford to have Bradford related pictures. We are launching our Living Well schools on the 4th of November, so I will put the, it's an online event. We thought it might be a little bit risky to do an in-person event, unfortunately, at the moment. So the 4th of November, I'll put the details in the chat as well. And lastly, the thing that I will mention is we are also working on a whole school approach around adversity, trauma and resilience in schools. We have a working group that I'm leading alongside our programme lead for adverse childhood experiences, and we do have some members of staff from schools who are already involved, but ideally I'd like to get some more people from education and school leaders involved, because you guys are really key to knowing about what works and giving us some real feedback. We've got some children and young people involved as well, to make sure that we are doing that real co-production. I think I have gone on quite a lot, so I will put my email address in the chat and would love to hear from you. We'll also be creating a newsletter to come out, so do get in touch if you would like to receive the newsletter about all the different things that are happening with Living Well schools. It's not going to be that regular. I'm not going to be sending a million every week, so don't worry, we won't be bombarded with stuff. But just when we get new programs and events happening. And I will be quiet now, so thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ros. Probably worth really advertising what great work that you're doing and the offer here. So one of the sort of things that became clear around things like sort of the mental health was just how bewildering the offer is sometimes to schools, and sometimes there are universal offers and sometimes there are targeted sort of offers. So this piece of work is all about simplifying everything for schools. And that website will then become a portal so school can go in and immediately get the information it needs with quality assurance, and hopefully stop making like the Wild West with all the pressures on teachers trying to work out which of all these sort of various offers should they be sort of doing. So it's really worth sort of saying that yourself and sort of Christian and this great sort of team and sort of Duncan be doing all this heavy lifting to make sure there's really streamlined sort of our offers. And this is, I think, playing out really well in terms of the Actors One sort of work that's happening across the sort of districts. It's really allowing us to get all of our health partners to coordinate their offers into sort of our schools. It's really a fantastic, exciting sort of a piece of work, and that's why we're so desperate to get school leaders and partners on board in order that it really can be co-produced, because when you get it right, it really does start to achieve our vision of bringing health, education, public health, all the different organisations together to act in the interests of children and young people. Go on, Ros.
Absolutely. I'll just say, I'm just really aware of time pressure, so sorry if I've been quite brief, but just at the launch, we are going to have a number of breakout spaces with quite a few different service providers. So they will do things like, from the mental health world, they will explain all the offers that are available for schools and kind of what the key elements to have a whole school approach or universal and targeted and stuff, as well as some of the VCS providers who are doing some great work as well. So it'll really bring the whole Living Well Schools programme to life during the event, hopefully. So that'll also be quite an exciting thing to come along to.
I think it's super exciting because it's all about that sort of multi sort of agency partnerships sort of working and recognising that schools are often hindered in doing what they do so well because of all those things that are happening outside the school sort of a gate. And all those things that are happening outside the school sort of gate are often being targeted by myriad different sort of organisations who perhaps aren't as well coordinated as they could be in supporting those sort of schools. So this is, I think, the whole system coming together to work out how we can support sort of schools to allow them to do what they're so good at so effectively. So yeah, so thanks, Ros, and thanks to you and the whole sort of team for putting all of this together. It's really great. And yeah, and again, just that sort of a plea to anybody who would like to get involved in this, please do contact Ros and sort of her team, and it'd be great because I think this could be just so powerful if we get it right. Thank you, Ros. So now it's with great pleasure I move us to the next agenda item, which is John Wright, who's going to tell us about some super exciting inward investment that's been made into Bradford related to the Born in Bradford project. So without further ado, John, are you there? Can we hand the floor to you?
I'm here, Mark. Thank you. Lovely to be back and be with you all again. I think this webinar is a great idea. I'm going to talk a little bit about Born in Bradford, which you'll probably be aware of because a lot of your children will be Born in Bradford children. We set Born in Bradford up in 2007 from pretty small beginnings, really, without very much funding, but with a lot of urgency, really around health outcomes, high infant mortality rates, high levels of diabetes and childhood obesity, and with a real focus that this is happening in childhood. Our adult disease is being shaped by our early life exposures. So the sort of science was very much around medical research when we began, and it's been a powerful driver of scientific discovery, grown into one of the largest and most exciting medical research studies in the world, and it's happening in our city, in Bradford, and it's happening because of the participation of 14,000 children and young people in the city and their parents. So we've got about 50,000 Bradfordians who are the engine room of all this discovery. And after the first few years, what we noticed is that it moved very much away from the sort of clinical side and onto, firstly, environment, recognizing and describing the effects of air pollution on our children's asthma or on our birth weight of our children, on green space, around noise, around food systems. And then with Mark's help and Katie's help around education as well. So particularly our sort of last phase of Born in Bradford, which is growing up, involved all the fantastic primary schools have been so supportive, where we've been disrupting classes and going in and doing computerized assessments and hopefully feeding back useful information to you about that. And these children really, you know, we're just finishing off this last phase. So again, there'll be a wealth of new knowledge and evidence that emerges from it. I suppose one of the directions of travel for us in Born in Bradford is to move away from just describing the problem and to start thinking about how we use a project that is as trailblazing as Born in Bradford. A real, you know, this is a real asset in the city. Something that the children are proud to be part of, the parents are proud to be part of. It's something that really sort of puts us in the spotlight. So to be a catalyst for change. And we've sort of tried to do that more about how we sort of both provide innovation and innovation in terms of our interventions, but also underpinning that with good evidence. Because what I've noticed in my 25-year career in Bradford is that there's a whole load of initiatives and ideas and stuff that comes along and funding comes with it, and then it all disappears and nobody knows whether it worked or not, and we're never in a position of what difference did it make. So we're very keen to underpin these innovations and interventions with evidence about what impact they have. And that's led to multi-million pounds investment in the city, probably about £100 million with things like Better Start Bradford and the Arts Council LEAP project and the JUMP project. So it's a great way of just bringing investment into the city. So those oldest children are 14 now and entering the teenage years. And we've been working with Wellcome over the last year and applying for funding for a large-scale follow-up of Born in Bradford to follow these children up through this adolescence. And Wellcome have told us last week that they are funding this. This is one of the big investment projects. They are, Jeremy Farrar, who you'll have seen on the telly through COVID, has been a big fan of what we've been doing in Bradford in terms of moving research away from the golden triangle of London on Oxford and Cambridge and to the north, but also becoming more diverse in its populations. And Born in Bradford is emblematic of that. High quality, cutting edge science and research where it's most needed. So this next phase, which is going to go on for the next 7 years, is called Age of Wonder. And it will capture the lives of our teenagers through the, I'm just getting messages from Rosalind Bradshaw all the time, so I keep getting distracted by reading them. So this Age of Wonder will be a really amazing period. It's, you know, this tumultuous phase of adolescence as the children move from childhood to adulthood, and all the dramatic changes in physiology and biology and social and environmental changes that happens in this transition, rapid transition over a few years. And what a time for that at the moment, you know, post-pandemic, austerity, Brexit, Black Lives Matters, this big social changes that are going on around us. So this is a chance for Bradford to become the source of knowledge in the UK and internationally. This will be the biggest study of adolescence in the world ever. We're going to expand it from the 14,000 children to involve every teenager in the city, 30,000 of them. So we want to be inclusive. What we found with the growing up phase of Born in Bradford through the primary schools is that actually people wanted to be, rather than just pulling Born in Bradford children out, since half the children are born in Bradford, it was easier and more inclusive to include everybody. So that's what we want to build on for this next phase. It's moving to the secondary schools, 38 secondary schools. So we're going to be needing your help for this. But we want it, you know, we need your help to contribute to this fantastic scientific enterprise, but we also want to contribute to supporting you and your curriculum delivery, and how we can use the evidence of what we collect to improve the experiences of these young people. So it's very much around that quality improvement bit, which we're really keen to major on. And mental health is a key part of this next 5-7 year project. So you know what's happening with your young people, but the mental health epidemic that's followed the COVID pandemic is something that we do need to do something about. And these young people have been the hardest hit, with their education disrupted, the social connections disrupted. So big focus on mental health and finding solutions to what we can do about that. But we also want to inspire them. So this is a generation where we have the richest data of any young people in the world. So we have gene sequencing, we have the metabolomics and proteomics and biomarkers. We have very detailed research data over the last 14 years as they've been growing up. We have the health records and their education records because of that consented linkage. So we want to get them engaged in what this data means, and we want to inspire them with science and to see how we can use it to support educational attainment. So let's see, one of sort of my conclusions after years of working as a doctor is that actually education is far more powerful tonic in medicine than anything we can do in the NHS. If we can get these young people thriving in education, then their life expectancy will improve more than anything we can do in the hospital. So we want to encourage a new generation of citizen scientists to get the young people involved, measuring their vitamin D levels, their blood groups, understanding their DNA, getting them excited by that, getting them replacing me, hopefully, and Mark and Katie, and seeing if as soon as possible, so that they're leading this study in the future. We want it to be a magnet for innovation of what we can do, particularly in the schools, but across the city. One of the sort of moves that we've had in Born in Bradford is to really take a whole system approach. So we work very closely with the local authority, with the voluntary sector, with transport and urban design, as well as the health service now and schools. So this is a chance to really have a whole system approach to what we're doing. So what does this mean for you? I suppose a lot of these people, I suppose one of the reflections from my discussions with Mark and Katie is how much pressure you're under, and how people are always asking you to do more and more stuff. So we're very aware of that. It has to be something that's useful to you. And we want it to be this cutting edge science to able to support curriculum implementation in the schools and to help you. So Katie and her team, her growing team, her embryonic team, will be in contact with the secondary schools and the academies and the trusts over the coming weeks and months to work out with you, and the co-production is really important, how we can do that, how we can engage with you, but how we can deliver this fantastic study as well. And more importantly, the co-production with the young people is really critical. So we're really getting them to shape what sort of questions, what sort of priorities. And from the work that we've been doing up till now, there's clear issues around that the young people want to get engaged in, around social media, around mental health, around diet and physical activity, as well as the science and the arts and culture as well. So what we've also found in Born in Bradford is that by having a very strong artistic element to our work, we've been able to capture that creativity. We've got artists in residency in Beasley and Carolyn Mendelssohn, and now musicians in residency in Macmillan the Poet. So there's a creative bit as well, which we hope to tap into. And we're going to have the announcement of the shortlist for City of Culture 2025 tomorrow, I think. We're hoping that Bradford will be on that list. Born in Bradford will be a key element to that success, because the children will be 18 in 2025. So it's a nice coming of age story that we can link in. So this has been multifaceted in terms of what its impact is. But fundamentally, it's going to be rooted in the schools. So please bear with us. Thank you, Mark.
That's brilliant. Thanks, sort of, John. And yeah, I guess our role within all of this is to start putting all our research, sort of, our partners into this sort of partnership, sort of working in recognition that every part of the system's got to sort of come together. So it's just such a wonderful opportunity for Bradford, I think. So we've got all the sort of things that we need. So it is now just a case of working together in partnership to see how we make them as effective as they possibly can be to improve children and young people's lives. So thanks so much for that, John. Inspirational as always. So we're now going to hear from Martin. So normally Duncan would give us the sort of key updates on public health. But if I can ask Martin to step in and tell us what we should know in the world of public health. So Martin, can I bring you in now, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes, Duncan sadly has fallen foul to the dreaded lurgy that is COVID, so he's in his bed currently. So my name is Martin Hannon. I've been working as the sort of bridge between the education teams and local public health teams in Bradford for a year now. Interestingly, when I first started working in September, and Sue Lowndes interviewed me and said, we'll probably need you till Christmas. What I failed to do, of course, then was to actually ascertain which Christmas it was that she meant. Mark at the top of the meeting talked about the bumpy road to recovery, and listening to all the great stuff that's happening, all the really exciting projects that are out there. It seems that it has to be me that talks about the bump that we are all going through at the moment, because you don't need me to tell you that cases have been rising significantly around schools. So I'll give you a few figures, share my screen with you in a moment so you can see some of the information that Duncan has provided. And then I'll talk about some of the emerging issues that head teachers like yourselves have been sharing with me. So if you just bear with me for one moment, I might need to disappear because where I am, audio and video don't seem to work brilliantly together. Okay, hope everyone can see that. So, really nice slide that's showing us that lockdowns actually do work. Really, Duncan wanted the message really to come out from that. So you can, if you go back to the left-hand side of the screen, looking back when we came back a year ago, when cases in all ages were rising, then we entered the second national lockdown, which was just before Christmas, if you remember, and then the third one properly when schools closed after Christmas. Notice that the 0 to 18 years were beneath the all ages aspect at the time. Apologies. And then we came to the time when schools reopened in September. At the beginning of June. Then the summer holidays, and then when we got to where we just reopened just now. I guess what's really noticeable is the fact that the school-age children, their cases have increased significantly compared to the all ages, and I guess that would be really down to the vaccination program that's kicked in, because of course now the under 18s are the area that are the age groups that have been significantly not vaccinated yet, and I'll come to that in a moment. That's the latest data that we had. We've gone from quite a low base, obviously, to quite a significant increase in cases in both staff and students, but particularly students in a short space of time. I know you guys feel that because I see the web forms that come in from you, and I feel the phone calls that come in as well. The number of outbreaks with 5 or more cases, again, I'll talk about that threshold that was in the contingency framework in a moment. We're up to 25 schools that have reported 5 confirmed cases among students, and some of those have both staff and students, and 1 school reported just amongst staff themselves. And that's the bit that most of you guys will be familiar with in your schools already. So overall, secondary school age children are higher than nursery and primary age school children, the number of cases that we've had, and then the reverse for staff. More primary staff have been affected. than secondary staff. So the things that I've been dealing with, I guess the biggest things that have been reported by head teachers are issues around the self-isolation, first of all, household contacts still attending school, and we've reported that to DFE. That's those instances where head teachers are standing by the gate in the morning and they are smiling and welcoming children when they realise that they're coming from a household where there are known positive cases, and yet the youngster is still allowed and indeed is attending school. We've reported that back to DFE. Their view at the moment is that schools and the DFE have to stick to the national guidance, which is that self-isolations, if you're under 18, etc., can attend school. We're picking up issues around testing. Lots of head teachers in secondary schools reporting that there's a certain weariness around testing and declining numbers. The DFE have published some more information that you will have seen in one of their email bulletins to try and promote that again, and we would encourage people to try and get as many people not only testing but reporting the results of testing as well. Third thing that we've reported back is around staffing. Staffing issues and staff absence have obviously increased. We've seen the stats on that, and that's having a significant impact on school budgets. We know that, and we've fed that back to DFE. Interestingly, I have picked up over the last few weeks cases where head teachers have reported that there is an issue with supply teachers. Supply teachers now seem to be saying, can I inquire why it is that I'm needed at your school? And if it's reported that it's to do with COVID, then I don't want to attend, please. And that's obviously having an impact on staff on schools having to deal with staffing at a short period of time. In terms of the contingency framework and outbreak management plans, we've worked with lots of schools to develop or introduce appropriate parts and the relevant parts of their contingency plan. Sometimes that can be as simple as not doing assemblies while there are rising cases. It can be through to, hesitate to use the word bubble because DFE don't like that word. So let's call it cohort management approach, where we can reduce the possibility of transmission by separating slightly at lunchtimes, break times, etc. So lots of those things that people were doing last year. And we've in fact gone up to mask wearing in some schools as well. Now, of course, DFE contingency framework says if you hit the magic number of 5, the threshold of 5 or 10% of linked cases, that you have crossed the threshold. And lots of head teachers have phoned me and said, I've got 5, now what's going to happen? And of course, nothing happens. I'm not sure if people were expecting SWAT teams in hazmat to arrive. But what they've said now, what they realise is once you put a number on it, people expect something to happen. So now it's more of a conversation. And that's what I have with lots of schools. And we can discuss ways of approaching the work that they want to do to try and reduce cases. Anything that we have introduced has been for around 10 days or so. And then it's reviewed. Sometimes schools see a massive outbreak in a short period of time. And sometimes it's just a bubbling along of 1, 2, 3, 4 cases a week. And if you're at all worried or you need some advice, then please don't hesitate to call. Mark at the top also talked about the great teamwork that goes on in Bradford. So I can still call on that brilliant team of Duncan and George and Bernie, etc. They're still there in the background for us to access. So if you need us, please ask. Finally, a couple of things on what's happening. That CO2 monitors we know that are arriving slowly in schools. I don't have any more information than you guys can see on the ventilation sharing platform. So our special schools and our AP sites should have received theirs, and a couple of secondary schools are down also to collect those. And lastly, on vaccinations, head teachers in secondary schools should have received the schedule for when that's going to happen. And the consent forms and leaflets should also have arrived. If you've not received yours, please could you get in touch with me. We do know, of course, sadly, that there have been issues where anti-vaxxers have been sending emails and the notorious consent form that was sent out with a checklist. Thankfully, none of our schools, I'm told, forwarded that. Several were very close. And also, thankfully, several were also good enough to say, that looks a little suspicious, and forwarded it to us so that we could validate it or not. And indeed, if you do receive anything that you are suspicious about, we would be grateful if you could forward that, and then we can stop anything like that happening. Lastly, on the vaccination programme, you may have noticed today the DfE have said to secondary schools that if you are due to be inspected on the day that your vaccinations are going ahead, vaccinations can take are the most important things. They can take place, and your inspection can be deferred, which is interesting. So once again, if there are anything that you need from your schools in terms of advice or support, then please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, thanks, Mark.
Great, thanks so much for Martin. And as always, if anyone's got any sort of questions to Martin, the public health team, just put them in sort of a chat. We were actually hoping to hear from Helen Jebb right now, but she's actually stuck in sort of a clinic. I think it's sort of fair to say that our paediatric colleagues are under quite a lot of pressure right now. Quite a lot of illness, not COVID, but just sort of a general sort of a winter illnesses hitting very, very early. And the paediatric sort of team themselves are reporting they're incredibly sort of busy. So that's one thing that we do need to keep monitoring and keep an eye on over these next sort of a few months. But Helen will potentially sort of join later to give us an update. But as I say, right now, we just had a message that he's got urgent cases to deal with. So what we're going to do now is move on to our very popular section of hearing from the heads and just hearing some of the insights on the sort of the ground for how they're sort of dealing with various issues that are playing out. So we're going to start by hearing from Lynette, who's going to be talking to us about staff mental well-being and pupil mental well-being from a primary school perspective. And then Luke will then start talking to us about the same topics from secondary school. If I can hand over now to Lynette. Lynette, can you take the floor, please?
I can indeed. Thank you very much and welcome back to everyone. I don't know how everyone else feels, but we're 5 weeks in. And as far as I'm concerned, we could be 55 weeks in. It feels no different at all. So resilience is on my mind at the moment. I'm going to focus particularly on the mental health of staff. That's something that's on my mind particularly at the moment. And just talk a little bit through my reflections and where I am. I'm not sure I have any words of wisdom. Maybe I'm looking for some kind of reassurance that other people out there are feeling what I'm feeling, seeing what I'm feeling. But, you know, I'll share it with you and we'll see where we are. When we broke up in the summer, it's fair to say that I was feeling pretty low, in a pretty bad place for one reason and another, teamed with exhaustion, absolute exhaustion from this whole situation. And I found it incredibly hard to switch off. And it really took me a good 3 weeks to get to the point where I could sleep properly and I felt like I was feeling more rested. Of course, 3 weeks into a holiday, you're then starting to think, well, I've got to go back in 3 weeks as well. So, you know, how you manage that is very difficult. And I started to really question my resilience of, can I do it all again? And I've said before, I do consider myself as being a very strong person. And if I was feeling that way, what on earth would other staff and early careers teachers and such, how would they be feeling as well? I also saw something that popped up on my social media about something called pandemic flux syndrome, and this real idea that you feel such sadness and anxiety, but you're desperate to bring change about your life and change to a situation. And that just isn't possible to do in the same way you would normally do if you felt low or you wanted to change something in your life. And I kind of read that and thought, do you know what? That's exactly how I'm feeling. I want to go and meet my friends to lunch, but I'm a bit scared to do that just in case. I kind of then move forward through, and this is kind of where I am now. How are we going to get back to working at the pace we did before, to driving that change and improvement in school? Because things have been so different for, you know, a good 18 months now. We've all changed. This situation has changed all of us as individuals, and it's changed our young people's lives as well. And lots of us here and in schools have suffered loss and pain in some level of way. You know, we at Grove House, we've just sadly, people's lost their auntie that was just 28 years old to COVID. And the desperation on his little face, I mean, it's just incredibly difficult. And I'm sure there's lots of other stories out there like that as well. But it's made me think at the beginning of the year, how are we going to do this? We're 5 weeks in, we know it's not a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, correct saying. And, you know, but we're desperate to bring around that pace of change again. But how do we do that safely? How are we supporting people? How are we managing that change process in school? Because I'm sure we're thinking about maths, we're thinking about mastery. Can we do mastery? Because there's so many gaps, and reading. And I was at Farnham last week that had their Ofsted last week. So, you know, throwing all that into the mix makes life incredibly difficult. Grove House and Crossley Hall in particular, we're seeing an increased amount, as I'm sure you are as well, of children with SEMH difficulties, and how that has been amplified or accelerated for them. We're seeing these signs coming out much sooner than we would have thought they would. We can use all the external support we want. We've got the swoosh offer, which is ongoing. I don't mind saying I've used that myself. The chap that I speak to, Dave, my saying is everybody needs a Dave, because I think Dave has helped me incredibly over the last kind of few months in particular. I have told him, I say that as well, and he probably thinks I'm slightly more crackers than I was when we started out, but anyway. And at Pennine, we also have a wellbeing strategy around our staff as well, of what we can offer them. And I think, you know, we're at a real changing point in this profession, we've got a real opportunity in front of us, in that we can change the perception of teaching. We can change what people think about workload and how we approach things. We can really alter the culture. But my question to everybody is, how do we do that? How do we do that effectively? How do we bring around those cultural changes in our profession that are then sustainable? And we're only at week 5. I think I've said that about 4 or 5 times, just in case no one heard me. We're only at week 5. That is all I've got for you. Like I say, there's no words of wisdom at all, but I'm really keen to hear from other people about what they're doing, what works well. I'd be more than happy to collate information together and get it out to people via Christian, so we can just share those good practices and be a shoulder for each other. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks Annette. You really bring it to life, and I really appreciate you sort of sharing your own sort of personal experiences, which are the same that everybody experiences. That's the human condition, but for some reason we like to hide away the fact that we're human. So it's great to have a humanity brought to this. Really appreciate it. And so we'll now hear from Luke on the same sort of topic, but as I say, from a secondary school perspective. So Luke, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, you can do. I don't think, is my video working? I've got a light on, but I can't see.
It is. We can see you, Luke.
Yes. In all my glory.
Absolutely.
We're going to get Matt to talk to you, Matt Atkinson, our assistant head, because he's the man on the front line, and I'd feel very remiss if I was stealing the glory for all the great work he's doing. So I'll just hand over to Matt. Thank you.
Okay, evening all. Obviously, thanks Luke for the introduction. So first and foremost, in terms of mental health here at Bingley, I start with it can be an emotive subject, but it needs a logical approach with internal training at the heart of it for staff and students. And that's the approach we've taken over the last sort of 4 academic years, with it being in the school improvement plan. Obviously, COVID, that's had a factor in it. And as I said to Luke the other day, yes, it has gone pop. But at the same time, it's just about having that logical approach about where we go next and what we do. So some of the key things we've done is the PSHCE and the RSE, okay, is we've looked at that, obviously revamped all that in line with everything that's from the DFE, but also as well, we've trimmed down our tutors to deliver it, because in secondary school, we used to have like 75 tutors, because obviously all the different year groups, but we've trimmed that down to a real tutor base of 25. So we get a really consistent message that's not diluted in any way, and therefore our training can be more effective with those people and to move it forward. Also as well with staff training, tying into Keeping Children Safe in Education 2020, and just before that, is the ACEs that somebody mentioned earlier, adverse childhood experiences, and making sure staff are trained on that and what the impact of that can be. And so, for example, passports, ACEs passports. So as soon as we identify that a student potentially has ACEs, it's the idea of like a special educational needs profile, but for ACEs. And so we can share that with students. And we started that with our LAC students, and then we've digressed further for, like, for example, our child in need, child protection, early help, and those on the periphery of that as well. Also as well, staff employment. So we employed Brian Padden to work with our LAC students, but then extended wider in terms of the training that went on with staff. And I think October 2020, when the NHS report came out, and it's probable mental health as opposed to diagnosable mental health conditions, and the figures of that and the key findings just really, really increased. And so with that in mind, Brian's currently working with a couple of people within the NHS about potentially looking externally and looking at level 3 counsellors that are wanting to move forward to level 4, and actually combining the training of that within schools so that students can get, as in the students for come level 4s, they get their hours, which realistically are 30 of the 100, if I'm correct on that, could be in a secondary school. So the idea is they come and train directly here, rather than maybe having to pay for an outside provider to come in. We actually do the training in school. We join the whole process up together. So we're currently looking at that and trying to move that forward here in school. So overall, okay, for us, it's just about that internal. If we can get the internal bit sorted, and then we've got everybody on the same sheet, and we can use that information to act upon it straight away to support the students and staff. Because sometimes when you do go external, as we know, there's long waiting lists, and therefore the information doesn't get passed back, and therefore it has an impact on the child, and therefore the social, emotional, and mental health impact can increase, which in turn can affect your exclusions and your detentions and all that type of aspects, which will then affect your results overall. So therefore taking it back internally and getting that sorted is key, and that's what we've been doing since 2018. So in summary, as I just said, it's the internal part, and if anybody would like to chat about that in any way, please do contact me here, or any ideas you guys have got, that would be awesome to take it forward. And if you're interested in terms of the level 3 to level 4, and anybody else is also looking at that, please do get in contact about that as well, because I think if more people are doing that and trying to push that forward, it'll move quicker. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Matthew. I love what this is doing in terms of building up this community sort of practice and just sharing sort of this great sort of learning. So yeah, really wonderful offer there for people to get in contact, share their learning, and learn from you. On that sort of a general topic, Ruth also put something in the sort of a chat, which is reminding us not to forget the educational and emotional well-being practitioners for children and young people with mild to moderate social, emotional, mental health issues relating to COVID. And she's put the sort of a link there. So, you know, just the more we can share these resources, the more we can share learning, the more we'll really start tackling these issues. So what we're now going to do is hear from John Skerr. John's been hosting some really exciting projects that are bringing together mental health service sort of teams and bringing them into sort of school sort of settings. And this work is really so influential that the CEOs, the head of all of the NHS, came to visit, I think it was last sort of week, and meet with John's sort of team and just hear about some of this really exciting work that's sort of happening. And again, I think it's just really sort of showing that this partnership playing out across sort of Bradford is getting national attention. That can only be good for us. It helps us pull in that inward investment that John Wright was talking about just sort of earlier. It's with great pleasure that I'm going to hand over to John now, who's going to be talking to us about student-pupil mental health and the lessons that have been learned through that trailblazing program. The trailblazing program being these efforts to bring health sort of services, mental health services, into schools. So John, can you tell us about your experiences with the mental health trailblazer, please?
Brilliant. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm John Skerr. I'm the executive head at Carlton Keighley, which is formerly UAK, and Carlton Bolling in Bradford. We were very fortunate, and probably the timing of the pandemic and everything that happened, to be part of the school selected to be part of the mental health trailblazing scheme. And probably I look back now and just think there was significantly good luck with that, because it's made a real difference for the life to sort of what we deliver at the academy and to the lives of our young people. So I sort of give you a bit of an overview of what the changes are, and also sort of how that's affected us as an academy and what we're doing to sort of develop that into whole school life. Because I think when we look at mental health, it's another sort of area of school life that we've got to concentrate on and develop within our structures, but sort of tie it into our current structures. So one of the first things that we had with this was we had from a trust perspective, we already have employee assistant programs, we have counsellors available for our trust staff, and it was about how do we develop this on the ground so that we're supporting young people. So the Trailblazer scheme allowed us to develop that mental health support network in schools for our staff and for our students. And this idea is that it tries to hit students at the layer before it gets to CAMS. I know as someone that's worked a lot in this field over the last 10 years, there's always been a massive frustration about the escalation and the support needed for young people. Well, the mental health Trailblazer scheme comes in at that pre-level, which for us has had a massive impact. So we started with a significant training program for student and staff looking at that, and incorporate that into our CPD program for staff across the academic year. And that's now embedded so that we have particular sessions focused on mental health and how that is for how we're developing that for staff, but also in our everyday life and practice for students. We've developed a culture now where we have regular mental health check-ins and drop-ins for students. It was a subject that was of great concern to students at the start, and probably something in the context of our community that a lot of schools did or a lot of the families didn't really pay much attention to. So developing that culture around it and developing that support mechanisms for students has allowed us to sort of raise the profile of mental health and well-being. Again, trying to make it more sustainable in our structure, we moved to a team around the child approach when we're looking at individual students for their whole wraparound care, and making mental health a real priority in that. That led to introductions of mental health passes, students who were going through particularly challenging times, having the ability to drop out of lessons but go and speak to one of the practitioners available. We then sort of expanded our nurture provision so that it would also incorporate some students with mental health issues, and that was a flexible approach, so it allowed to deal with need at times of challenge and would link to reintegration timetables, etc., that would come maybe from students who had been off for a period of time, who had been on extended leave, or who were returning to school after COVID and particularly worried about it. As an academy, we've also changed sort of our approach around intervention, and we've introduced forest school, gardening intervention, boxing interventions, and a lot of that is to help with sort of personal discipline, resilience, and emotional regulation for some young people. And they're very developmental groups, and one will focus on emotional resilience, one's on group self-esteem, and one's on healthy relationships. And we've developed that in as a wraparound strategy for our young people, so that we've got an ongoing program that we can assess where young people are at. We've also developed sort of some mental health support for some of our extremely vulnerable young people, and by having a very bespoke program to them. And previously we'd taken them to an equestrian centre where we developed a program with the centre to looking at sort of their mental health and how we can empower them in a non-threatening environment to allow them to sort of process feelings and rebuild trust. The next stage for us as an academy is sort of peer mentor training, and we're in the process of training students to support others with mental health challenges. By no means is it a finished article, and we're sort of growing the program as we're going on. What I would say is that, I was very keen to get Carlton Bolling on board, and unfortunately we're not in the next phase of the program. But if you're being asked about the program and you're questioning whether to join, I can only sing absolute outstanding praises about all the people in the program, the support it's given for our young people, but also what it's added to our school and our culture within our school, and making sure that mental health concerns and worries are seen as normal now, and it's not something that's very different. Actually, we have a better understanding about mental health and how we help and support each other. So as an academy, I would thoroughly recommend it. What I would say is the commitment to this is to make it work, you've got to be fully involved. our team, and we're lucky in Keighley we have plenty of space, that they have a designated area. The staff are very comfortable in the school environment. They know their way around. There's a very good induction program, and it means the relationships are really, really positive. And I know for some schools, and particularly secondary, sometimes the agency work has sometimes had barriers in place. And I think with the Trailblazer scheme, what I've found so far it's the absolute opposite of that. All barriers have been reduced. There's a really collaborative working environment, and that has led to massive improvements and impact for our students. And unfortunately, the day before Amanda Pritchard came to visit, I was diagnosed with COVID. So I am actually on my last day of isolation. So I'm very much looking forward to rejoining the team. And I know it's a fantastic event, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you to the mental health practitioners that are working with our academy, because it's made a real difference. Thank you.
Brilliant, John. I can feedback that they love working with you and your schools and your team. You were greatly sort of remiss, but your team was fantastic. The opportunity was great to say to Amanda Pritchard, isn't this fantastic? She was blown away by that work that's happening. But then we could point out that's currently only providing support to 30% of our schools, which means there are 70% of our schools not getting those sort of benefits. So we're absolutely dedicated as a system to holding, well, central government speaks to sort of fire, holding Amanda Pritchard sort of speaks to the fire on this, because this is essential sort of work. And, you know, we've got great colleagues such as sort of Sasha Back, who's really sort of pushing forward around commissioning to try and make this offer widely available so that every school in Bradford can have this sort of a benefit. So, no, really great to hear from you, sort of, John. And yeah, thanks so much for making that Trailblazer a real success. Excellent. So we're now going to hear from Chris, who's going to talk to us about how you go about establishing some kind of form of normality for primary school sort of children. So Chris, could you talk to us on that topic, please?
Hi, yes, can you hear me? All right, you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I was asked to talk about, well, I sort of wanted to talk about establishing normality for primary pupils. I think that as a school, you know, we found readjusting since coming back in September, I think difficult, and Lynette mentioned it earlier, and I thank you for her comments. I think it's been an adjustment for us, but also adjustment for the children. And some of the things sort of we've found around pupil self-esteem, sort of those pupils finding confidence to sort of reintegrate back into school on a regular basis. I think one of the things we found is that whole sort of day in, day out, week by week coming to school has been quite difficult for a number of our families and a number of our children. Adapting the curriculum, we certainly find a number of our children in year 3, for example, have missed a lot of their Key Stage 1 experience. I saw a statistic the other day that children in year 2 have never had a full year in school, which is quite a frightening stat, really, when you think about it. Our year 3 children have missed a lot of the Key Stage 1 curriculum, so we're finding we're having our staff having to adapt their teaching to meet Key Stage 1 needs in a Key Stage 2 classroom, which brings with it a lot of issues and things to work through. And then obviously for staff, it's sort of recognizing that not one thing is going to work all the time, and then trying to find our way back to support those children to find and reassemble some normality for them. And one of the big things we've done, which has been really successful, is we're part of the JUMP project and part of the Creative Arts at Schools framework. Alongside that, we're also part of Nurture Friendly School. So we've really tried to look at sort of holistic view of how to support children coming back to school. We have sort of 6 forest school sessions a week where we're tailoring that to support our children to go outside and make really good use of our outside grounds, which we've got a nature reserve sort of and lots of outside space into Pittybeck, which is close to us, so those children can get the nurture that they need. We've sort of recreated our timetable a little bit. So on a Friday afternoon, the whole school does physical activity outside for the last hour before they go home. We recognised that children needed to do that to support them, but also families we were talking to also were talking about their children coming out of school in a different mindset. And we also realised that at the moment the children were not able to take in as much of the curriculum as we would like, and we had to adapt our teaching. So Friday afternoon, for just before we do physical activity, we have a sort of 30-minute review session, so a weekly review session of the work we've done that week. So it's not new content. It's not, and I think that way we've sort of recognised the cognitive overload and the demand on children of all ages, particularly when they've missed so much school, it's been really tricky. So that's actually been really successful for us, because we've had to adapt and try to give them some normality on top of, that, I suppose there's always that internal pressure, isn't there, of these children are in year 3 or year 5. We want them to work at those age-related expectations, but actually, when you break it down, it's what do those children need for them right now at this moment in time. And we recognise in our year 3-4 class, we have some children who actually need some Key Stage 1 support. And actually, people need to be brave and make those big decisions for those children, because that's what they need at that time. And actually, yes, I'm very aware, and I think we all are, of what content we have to get through and what the children need to know. But learning behaviours, making sure the children are in the right place to be able to learn that is key, and that's been one of our big things that we found to try and establish that normality. The Creative Active Schools framework, which I'll mention, we're lucky to be part of that project. We were part of it because we're based in Allerton, has played a significant role in supporting our children coming back to normal school. So we really sort of embraced the sort of ethos around Creative Active Schools. I'll put the link in the chat to the website. Some schools on here might be part of it already, but it's enabled us to look at holistically what children need, and that's active travel in terms of how much PA they do, so that's physical activity they do in a day, why it's good for them, and then being able to link that into sort of other subjects across the school. And I, from Forest School's work to visits outside in the local area, to increase the amount of circle time and teamwork work in PSHE, we've really had to do those things to establish that normality for them. And it is a balance, there's no doubt about it. There's a balance between the curriculum and how to get those children in the right mindset to be back in school and ready to learn. But I think we're sort of trying to create that balance, and being part of those initiatives around Jump and Nature Friendly Schools has been a big part of that. So I wanted to mention that for our school, it's been a big factor. And linking to Lynette's point about supporting staff, I think, we always have to bear in mind that, we want great staff to be in a healthy mindset to enable them to establish that normality for our pupils. And actually, addressing these things that are cropping up, like the year 3 issue I discussed, we've got to be there to support those teachers through what is a really difficult period of time. If you're a Key Stage 2 teacher, but you're having to teach Key Stage 1 skills, and you're having to sort of adapt your teaching for Key Stage 1 pupils, it's not easy. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. And as leaders and as kind of leaders throughout Bradford, I know lots of people are facing the same issues. But to establish that normality for our primary pupils, it's really important we support those staff to do that at the same time. So that's what I wanted to sort of mention and briefly go over. And also sort of have a big shout out to the Nature Friendly Schools and Creative Active Schools framework, because it's been a really big barometer for us to support our children and our community.
That's fantastic, Chris. And it just sort of loops in everything, right? So we've got a big neon sign here which says everything is sort of connected. So that Creating Active Schools sort of framework is now helping us to develop another framework, which is creating healthy sort of schools, that schools can actually use that sort of framework, not just help children be active, but to support the sort of mental health. And the DFE are looking to, have actually invested in that. So that we can then hopefully make that available to schools again throughout sort of a district. And it's just what we're sort of hearing here, isn't it? How all of us working together are just creating these sort of opportunities. And it's just wonderful to behold. So really great, Chris. Thanks so much for that. So last but not least, we're going to be hearing from Sian around COVID security, so testing and vaccination sort of our status. So massive thank you to Chris, and now over to Sian.
Hi everybody, my name's Sian Hudson and I am the head teacher at 2 of Bradford's maintained nursery schools. So that's St Edmunds and Lillycroft nursery schools. And I'm really pleased to be talking to you today as a representative of the early years sector, because quite often we're underrepresented, but our Bradford nursery schools are amazing, and we're really proud of them. So from a bit of an early years perspective, but also a whole school perspective, I want to talk to you about what we've done around vaccinations and testing. Again, I'm not saying that these are the answers, whether it's the right way or not quite right way for you, sometimes it helps just to hear what other people are doing. So I'll go for it. So it's no longer an option for staff to shield. So everybody's back at school, which is good. We've redone our risk assessments for the millionth time, shared those with everybody. I do have a more staff friendly risk assessment that we call the operating procedures. We went through all of those on the training day and gave everybody a chance to ask questions and try and get some sort of clarity, because it's massively confusing for everybody, isn't it? So what are the rules now? They change every 5 minutes, as we know, and we have to try and keep up with those. So yet again, another way of working, which is actually quite different now. So if people are worried, then we have obviously offered them personal risk assessments using the NEU guidelines. And as I do appraisals, I'm just talking to people generally about their concerns. Do they have any concerns about COVID for themselves or their families? Do they want to discuss anything around that? Most staff are okay, but I think it's really important to ask people individually rather than just a blanket comment. If anybody wants if anyone wants personal risk assessment, come and see me, because I think they're less likely to. So that's just the way that I've been approaching it. Okay, as we know, our aim now is to stay open at all costs. So that is what we've been trying to think about. How can we do that? So in our schools, we use casual staff. So we have a pool of staff that are quite well known to us, and we use those staff to come in when other staff are sick. And that works really, really well for us. So we don't use supply agencies. We've not used a supply agency for years and years. And this way of working does actually work really well. So when people inquire about, have you got any jobs? We say, would you like to come in and do a trial with us, see how you like us, see if we like you, and then we put them on our casual list. We have got lots of staff off at the moment, not that many with COVID, luckily. But like, for example, we've had, I think, 6 members of staff off today. Tests are slowly but surely coming back negative, I'm pleased to say, but that could all change tomorrow, couldn't it? We don't know. We're in that situation where we're still reacting day to day, and you try your best to plan, but it doesn't always go to plan. I think we need to support each other, which is what I'm telling my team all the time, and I think we're doing all right. And this webinar is really good to support each other as well. Okay, so since September, we've tried to get back to normal. So what I mean by that is no bubbles, no separate spaces, no more taking temperatures, which we were doing for all children. We don't do that anymore. No face coverings, no staggered exit, start and finish times, everyone in through the main door. And so far, so good. We're obviously monitoring it really closely. If we get big groups of people, then we're trying to disperse them as much as we can, but it's been okay. We're doing all right. We make sure that SLT are around, like I'm sure you all do, to welcome parents and make sure everything's okay. So parents and visitors are welcomed back to our schools, and it's been so brilliant to see parents coming in to play and learn sessions with their little babies, and that has all been brilliant. We've had loads of students back. I've just been doing some training today for a group of 20 students on our skip program, and it's been really fantastic. It's been a bit overwhelming for some people. They've reported that to me, but I think the majority of staff and parents are really pleased to be back in school. Okay, so we are, from an early years perspective, there were lots of things that we had to do differently during the main part of COVID. We were open throughout for everybody, but we did have restrictions, as in we didn't use as many sensory resources. Those are all back now. We've got all our soft furnishings back, which is really good, but we are making sure that we wash them regularly, so every week on a hot temperature. So things, I mean, it's part of good practice, but it's even more important now. We're still doing enhanced cleaning, so staff are still cleaning surfaces and light switches, toys, resources as much as they can, and we're still doing loads and loads of hand washing. Our titchy tiny children are absolutely brilliant at it, so we just need to keep up the good work there, which is we're doing. We use aqueous ozone a lot, which is really good. So it's magic water, which I was informed about from one of my nursery school colleagues, and it's really, really good. You can spray it on hands, you can spray it on surfaces, and it kills all germs, but only for 24 hours, and then you've got to throw it away, and you sort of put all these it's like ozone stuff. I don't know the science, but it makes the water into an antibacterial, that kills 99.9% of germs, but without any chemicals. So that's really, really good. Highly recommended. Okay, so that's how we're operating at the moment. Regarding vaccinations, so all staff were supported to have their vaccinations as soon as we were able. And I've looked up that unions are in support of vaccinations, which is a good thing. When we all came back in September, I did ask all my staff what their vaccination status was. So they were all happy to share that. If they hadn't have been, I wouldn't have forced them to, but they did share that. And across both schools, we've got around 2/3 of staff that are double vaccinated. Our aim is not to try and persuade people, colleagues who are not vaccinated, to change their minds. It's a personal choice. I just felt that it was really important that I knew who was vaccinated and who wasn't, so that I could be supportive in identifying close contacts. So as we all know, staff who are close contacts of a positive case, who are double vaccinated, are not required to isolate, but those who are not vaccinated and have come into close contact are required to isolate. So we treat each case separately. I made lots of phone calls to the DfE and anybody else who I could think of in the summer holidays, trying to find out a little bit more about close contact. I couldn't, I failed. They said each and every case you need to seek advice. So what I've done is talk to lots of people, and now we're making our own decisions, basically. So if I know we're not required to track and trace people, and it's supposed to be an NHS job, but I just don't feel quite comfortable with that. I feel like if a member of staff tests positive, or a child we find out has tested positive, then what I do is I talk to the staff and the families, and I talk to them as much as I can, and I try and establish if we actually have had close contact. So for example, we have big classrooms and children are free flow, and if you've been outside all day, then you might not have been in close contact with the member of staff who's tested positive. So it's a case by case. That's how I'm doing it. So if staff do have to isolate because they've not been vaccinated, I am requiring them to work from home. So they need to work their full hours that they're paid and contracted to work. They need to fill in a log, and they need to consider their work, the work that they're doing. It needs to benefit other people, not just themselves. So they need to be working towards the good of the school and the team, and that's really closely monitored by us. I know colleagues who are enlisting staff to work online from home, which I think is a great idea, just to make sure that they are still working. So just because they're isolating, they are still working, and that helps other members of staff to see that it's a bit of a fairer system. And so far so good, it's working okay. With testing, we're encouraging everyone to continue their rapid home testing twice weekly. I think it's not as many, well, definitely not as many people are doing it as they did originally, but I am requiring that they report either that they've done the test and it's positive or negative, or that they're not tested. Again, I'm not trying to persuade people to do the tests. If they don't want to test, then that's up to them. I'd say around, again, 2/3 of people are continuing to do the test. So anyone who does have COVID symptoms and is off work for symptoms that are similar, so bad headaches, body aches, all that sort of flu-like symptoms, then they are required to take a PCR test. And anyone who's been in close contact with someone who's tested positive is also strongly encouraged to take a PCR test and more regular LFTs. So for example, if a member of staff child has COVID and they're still coming to work, then they are asked to do an LFT every day, which most people are happy to do. Okay, so COVID cases all treated individually, like I've said already, reported online to the local authority. And although I've not taken advantage of this, colleagues have said that the supportive calls offered by the local authority have actually proved to be very useful and supportive. So take advantage of that if you need to. Our public health colleagues have already talked to us about the 5 cases within 10 days, the magic number. So we know we need to contact them and have a discussion if we have more than 5 cases within 10 days who have been in close contact. And like I said earlier, we've got currently just a couple of staff who have got COVID and a couple, but lots of staff off for other reasons. So I am encouraging them to all be tested. Luckily, those tests are coming back negative this week, but it could change anytime. If people have symptoms in school, then again, that's treated as case by case. So if children have symptoms, if staff have symptoms, then they all come to me or another member of the senior leadership team and discuss it. And just to finish, I think what everybody's saying is the support is really, really crucial at this time, more important than, well, just as important as ever. As nursery schools, we have a really good support network. We pick up the phone and we have a chat, and it just helps so much. The swoosh thing that everyone's been talking about apparently has helped lots and lots of people, so take advantage of that. But just anytime you need support, please do seek it, because it is absolutely invaluable. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, Sian. Thanks so much, and perfect sort of time. I'm just on the past sort of an hour now. So just great to hear that message again. It's all about us working together, acting as sort of one to support each other. So next webinars on the 2nd of December, same time. So we'll advertise the details. Everything you've heard today will be captured, the recording will be available, get the information out there in order that we can just keep sharing that learning and keep working together. You've heard about the Living Well Schools piece of work. There'll be a launch of that on the 4th of November. Some big names talking about what an amazing piece of work it is, and really sort of showcasing the great stuff happening in Bradford, and hopefully giving some really powerful tools that will make life easier for everybody across the whole sort of school system. So we'll leave it there for tonight. Say a massive thank you to all our speakers, massive thank you to everybody for coming together. Please do disseminate this information widely, because it is by acting together, acting as one, we're going to make the lasting changes that we need to see across the district. So thank you. Have a great evening. Yeah, thanks again to everybody. Do, as sort of Sian has encouraged us, seek support. Let us know if there's anything we can do, and together we will come out of this terrible sort of time. Thanks all. Good night.